Rakhi ma'am, we can start.
Okay, so very good evening to all of you, ladies and gentlemen, who are joining us on our weekly talk show, which is Her World India Talk Show, which we mount every Saturday, 6 to 7 p.m. We partner with Policy Center and Chandala Miranda House, Delhi University. And we've been doing it for a while, trying to catch all these voices which come from women and girls. We talk a lot about gender issues as to what are the areas of gaps that we must address, but also talk about contemporary and current affairs here on this platform. We have a web portal where we talk about these issues in terms of writing pieces, blogs and articles and opinion pieces. But this talk show is mainly trying to have a voice of all those community of girls and women who matter, who are trying to make a difference in society. And that's where we are today. The theme is finding spaces for employment for women, especially in the critical time of COVID-19. And we have two very eminent speakers. And I'm truly, truly delighted on behalf of my team and myself, Rakhi Bakshi, to welcome two of them. I begin by talking about Dr. Soundarya Rajesh, who's a very prominent speaker, not only in her own right, but as somebody who's talked about women's rights, especially in career opportunities, finding the rightful places as far as their professional careers are concerned, and also, always trying to kind of create that kind of dialogue as far as women and their work is concerned. She has a great profile, as you can see, and I don't need to mention so much, but somebody who's been not only recognized, acknowledged all over by the government as well and by other societies, but somebody who's continuously working through different dimensions on the area of women in work, at work, and how they should find more spaces to work and find rightful spaces. So I welcome you, Dr. Soundarya Rajesh, to the show. And our second speaker is Shinjini Kumari, somebody again, who, as in her introduction says, that though she started to take interest in journalism and literature, but actually took a very vibrant subject to work on, which was economy, right from her journey from Reserve Bank of India to later Citibank to later Paytm. I think some of these very vibrant organizations that she's led in terms of public policy also that she has tried to understand when she studied abroad. She brings to the fore, ladies and gentlemen, a mixture of her understanding of media, communication, but also women and economy. She also now has her own app, which is called SALT. I would like to ask her later when I begin my conversation with her as to why it's called SALT. But I think SALT is very essential. That's why, Shinvi, you must have thought about it, where she talks about women, economy, and their choices. And when we talk about actually women empowerment, I think choice is the word that I really focus upon. It's very, very important. So, ladies and gentlemen, I begin this conversation on women finding rightful spaces. And here we are. I start with Dr. Soundarya Rajesh. Dr. Rajesh, tell us why it is so critical now to talk about women and their choices, their spaces as far as employment is concerned, when we talk about women empowerment. I mean, why are we focusing on this? Why there is an urgent need? I mean, we know the data would say that, yes, we need to address it, but how do we do it? And why there is an urgent need to address it, Dr. Rajesh?
Thank you. Thank you so much, Rakhi. And it's a pleasure to be here on the Her World show. And I must thank Inakshi for, suggesting and kind of getting me on board this platform. I hope you're able to hear me well.
Yes.
I hope there's no, disruption. Okay. So first of all, this topic, women finding spaces of employment and, the particular COVID scenario, which we all are talking about, there is no need to mention that this is among the most pressing topics that is creating many a furrow, on the foreheads of multiple stakeholders, whether it be the government, whether it be, the not-for-profits that are working in this space, whether it be the organizations and enterprises which are, trying to see if there could be a solution to this. And there is no denying the fact that, the impact of COVID-19 has been absolutely devastating for the women in the workplace. Millions have, lost their jobs, and the fact that women are at that disposable front line of any such economic VUCA-ness is something that, that really, makes us feel bad. And we need to delve into the reasons for why is this happening. Why is it that women's careers are so much more vulnerable than men's? And why is it that, things like COVID, and the reason I'm referring to COVID is because it's still in the air. I mean, pardon my pun, but it's still very much in the air, and it has had such a damaging impact on, women's careers. So if you actually look at it, was COVID the only reason for why India has such a meager women's workforce participation? I mean, at about 27% pre-COVID and at about 24% post-COVID, India's women's workforce participation rates is absolutely among, the pits as far as the world is concerned. And the massive decline that women's workforce participation across all levels, and I'm including, the migrant workers there who paid a very, very heavy price, not just economically but in every way possible. Them construction workers, agriculture workers, and of course, women in the industries such as leisure, entertainment, retail. All of them, were disrupted. Their careers were taken away. The money just stopped coming in, and they faced a huge amount of, challenges.
Okay.
Well, the same is not true of women in tech. And that's a little bit of a, of a softener of the blow, in a manner of speaking. I'm very happy to share that, women in the tech industry saw the least disruption, because a lot of the organizations had already kind of, prepared themselves for remote working. So and it was very easy for, women in tech to actually work from home.
Mhm.
So that is one of the things. But even if you look at women in tech, and if you look at, organizations that have had to
Okay.
let go of people, women form a huge percentage of that. And why is that? That's because of multiple reasons, and I'm not going to go into the larger socio-economic, reasons which are responsible for that. I'm just going to look at only one part, which is skilling. And I'm going to, sort of dwell upon the fact that if you look at skills which are at play in the workplace, you can broadly divide them into the lower order skills, the middle order skills, and the higher order skills. And you will find, and this is true of any industry, this is true of any domain, and you will find that women are more or less concentrated within the lower order skills, and to some extent in the middle order skills. So their availability in the higher order skills is itself not there, because in India
Okay.
particularly
So,
there
Dr.
is a
Rajesh,
GR. Yeah, sorry.
I would like
Yes,
to go actually to now Shinjini and
yes,
ask
please.
her, because Shinjini is someone who has, taken up the what you're saying, the higher up level. So she's led from the front. She's held responsible positions. She's been heading organizations and very vibrantly. So Shinjini, being at the top of some of the organizations that you've been at, what would you say? How are you be looking at all the levels? Because the idea is to actually have more women at all levels in all organizations. How would you really look at them from the top of maybe being amidst them?
Thank you for having me here. And I will just continue with where Dr. Rajesh was, which is to say, yes, that's a very real issue, that when you talk about what she mentions as higher order, and I think higher skills or higher number of years in experience, primarily leadership roles, right? Leadership roles that require a lot of prior investment by way of training or learning, or essentially commitment. You do see the thinning of the women, right? And you see that thinning despite the fact that a lot of effort has gone into actually creating larger numbers at the entry level. So in at least in all my previous organizations, because what you didn't see on my on my bio is I also worked at PricewaterhouseCoopers for 6.5 years, which was one of those large employers hiring high skill women and men, right? Because chartered accountants and MBAs and things like that. So even, and as well as at Citi, as well as at the other places that I've worked in. So at the intake level, I think organizations have made conscious effort over the last decade, I would say, to bring in more greater gender, I should say, equality, parity. So they do go out of their way to find campuses where there are. So first of all, it starts from the higher education itself. So as in work, so in education. Early level, higher participation of girls doing better results, better marks. And then as you keep moving up, then you first see them dropping off for some reasons. And then you see them not getting into the same sort of IITs, and you see the thinning, right, happening in the education itself. So by the time somebody like us goes to a campus to hire, there is already a smaller pool of women to choose from. And there are various ways in which we try to solve for this problem. We tried to go to women only campuses. We tried to do tie up with organizations that were working with women at workforce. And we did try to balance that participation of women and men in the workforce. Having said that, once, even if you start there at a 40, 60 or 35, 65, you start to see that thinning very quickly after that. So first 4-5 years, it is fine. And then the moment it comes to, two things begin to happen. One is, of course, family pressure, or marriage and relocation, and always the girls has to give up the career and move to the place where the guy is, or whatever that happens. And then children, but that's one part of it. That's societal, and of course we need to do something about it, but that's societal. But even as a workplace, what begins to happen is that in terms of promotions, in terms of getting the raises, in terms of maintaining that parity, I know so many couples who both starts from the same campus, who both start from the same chartered accountancy degree, both start in the same organization. And 4 years down the line, even if you can see that the girl is smarter, you will see that the boy is more, how should I put it, looking at himself for the next role vis-a-vis that girl. And you wonder what happened. Like, she was actually already much smarter. So I'm saying this is only 4 or 5 years into the job. And then at every stage, that thinning continues. It's like, fast losing your hair. It starts from one place and then very soon it's not there. So by the time you reach the actual leadership levels, you're effectively struggling to find that pool of women to choose from, because you don't necessarily just want to pick up somebody and give them a job because they're a woman, even though you really want to increase diversity, because it's not good for you, it's not good for them, it's not good for anyone. So you do want to have a pool, okay? And that pool is just not there. So of course we try to do various innovative things in our own ways to increase that. And I've seen organizations, particularly at Citi, and as well as I would say in PwC, where that commitment to increasing that leadership was very high. And yet it's not easy. And I just want to say that it is not easy at those senior levels. And because it is not easy at senior levels to continue to retain and attract women in leadership positions, that again it's a vicious circle. So that has a bearing on how you hire, how you retain, how you handhold your intake of women as they progress through these cycles of various life stages where they will drop off from the workplace. So I can say that personally, when I was and PwC was a very supportive employer, and we had a whole lot of policies that were global. But I still remember when the first time I went and asked, I gave one of the girls in my team a full flexi time after her child for a long period of time, 6 months. And she came back for an extension, and she was a brilliant girl and she was doing very well. I still had to justify it to other partners because they'd never done it before. It's not that they didn't want to, but that education, that commitment, that time that I was spending in educating male partners to say that it's okay, I'm happy with her work, is not the type of time that you will generally spend if you're not if you're not there. So therefore, this not having enough women in the leadership is obviously a double whammy, but it is a reality. The saddest thing is that as participation of women in education is increasing, their participation in formal workplace is also decreasing, and pretty sharply. So that, of course, there is another way to look at it. I personally look at it in a very different way. and I'll talk about it later. I don't want to take all your time, but
so we'll keep
yeah.
talking and coming to both of you one by one. But now each point. So, for example, Dr. Rajesh, you talked about, you were just touching upon the fact that we are in a crisis time also, and it becomes very, very again important, critical almost, that we really give women their rightful spaces. They should find more support in terms of the kind of money that should come in. Many of them are working from home. At home, there are problems of all kinds. In fact, we've seen last year the cases of domestic violence rose. The kind of interpersonal relationships at home, finding spaces, children, their school, their education, all those things double up, and that's where the woman actually finds her at risk of how to take her job ahead. And very strongly, some of them have lost jobs, many of them are struggling. How do we really look at a positive, optimistic way around the situation, Dr. Rajesh?
Well, that's a question which has multiple layers to it, in terms of, see, everyone agrees that increasing women's workforce participation is actually key to economic recovery. I mean, it's not just the good thing for the woman; it's the good thing for everyone when you have more numbers of women in the workplace. What has the current situation really done? I think it has done a series of things. First of all, it has, made organizations realize that work from home as a concept is not such a tough thing. And, it kind of accelerated the remote working, phenomenon, or the remote working practice across several organizations which wouldn't even consider it before, in a matter of a few months. So I think that is progress, and that is, and flexibility, is the oxygen of women's careers. If you provide women with strategic flexibility at various points of time in their lives, not necessarily only during maternity and motherhood, even during things like, the 10th standard exam and the 12th standard exam, which used to be such stressful periods of time for the mother, and if she had flexibility at that time, if she was able to take additional leave, then that most certainly saved her career. So this idea of having that flexibility, providing remote working which actually works, these are things which corporate India has embraced, I would say. And I'm very delighted to stand at the sidelines of that change and that transformation, and I'm very happy to see that happening. That's one point. The second point I would say, and I'm going to restrict myself to 3 points, just like Shinjini mentioned, we can share a lot more within smaller periods of time. So the second point is, I think there has been a great deal of awareness that when you have women who are not sufficiently skilled, then obviously that's a bigger problem for everybody. They lose jobs, but that's not the only thing. The organization also realizes that it has kind of amassed a lot of people at the entry level who who are not able to contribute during times of crisis like this. So there is an additional focus by organizations of skilling women. And interestingly, it's not only the women that work within the organization that the organization wants to skill. I'm seeing now a regeneration of a kind of community building, which organizations are taking upon, saying that, hey, here is an opportunity for us to engage with women who don't necessarily need to come to a Mumbai or come to a Chennai or come to a Delhi and work. And, they could comfortably be in their own Kanpur and in their Salem and in their Hubli, and they would still be able to contribute. So, what do we need to provide them in order to make them employable? So, this entire concept of women having to work near home, I think that has been enabled, and that's my second point. My third point is, of course, the fact that this was an interesting, data point which actually we had researched, and Times of India carried it on the 8th of March, International Women's Day, as its front page cover story, which is the fact that we are seeing a very healthy, happy, and a very encouraging uptick of more married women applying for jobs to organizations which encourage remote working. And as we all know, it's only when more married women are in the workplace that you will actually find the benefits of women's labor force participation, going high. So I thought I would, share these 3 points with you.
Okay. Okay. So you, of course, being the optimistic person and the career progressive woman that you are, Dr. Rajesh, you've touched upon very vibrant points, and these are points to really note down as well. But Shinjini, one of the things that I raised, and maybe you can answer that or try to answer that, is that how do they really balance? There's this very stereotypical maybe word or term, but we keep hearing that. How does she really balance, especially in the times of COVID-19, where she is working from home, the situations at home, and then the pressures of work? How does she really balance, Srinjini?
So, obviously I have worked 30 years, right? So I've seen various phases of this attitude about women in workplace. And when I was young, when I had little children, I used to always get very frustrated that if I ever went and told my boss that I was going to go for the kids' PTA, it was like, these women have these PTAs to attend. But if a guy went and said, I have a PTA to attend, it was so cute. He's such a lovely guy, right? Such a lovely father. And I used to get very annoyed with that. I once had somebody tell me that I was in and this was at RBI, which was actually which was actually a lot better in terms of gender, because you joined as an officer, you came with this halo, everybody treated you very well. But even there, I remember once I was moved to, I went on a transfer, and there was me and there was another person who had come with me, which was a man who was my batchmate, and both of us applied for a house, and one apartment became vacant. And so I went to check with that guy, and I said, are you giving that apartment to me? And he said, we are giving it to this guy because he has a wife and a wife to bring from somewhere. I was like, what, really? Like, are you really more sympathetic to the man? But because he was a man, right? So to him, the idea that this man was living alone and cooking for himself needed a wife to come and start cooking for him.
That's a laugh.
He was so sympathetic that the idea of me living alone and cooking and coming to work was obviously not something he could not relate to it. Like he was a sweet chap, but he just could not relate to this problem because he'd never seen this, right? So I've seen that on the one hand, and then over a period of time, I've obviously seen very different and very interesting manifestations of this. Now, one of the latest manifestations of this, I'll skip all the years in between, and I'll just go straight away to COVID. So when COVID happened, I was obviously at Citi. I had no plans of leaving Citi at the time. So I had a 4,000 member team and 860 or so people in branches, and we had to keep the branches open, but we have to move everybody else to work from home. And that included people that did a range of things, and many of them had never worked at home. And we had to take care of the technology and everything. So the very interesting things started to happen as a part of that process. Of course, we did it all very well because we had a lot of support from global and technology and all of that. So not a real logistical challenge, but in terms of the attitude, you start to see after some time how things happen, right? So there are leaders for whom it's very hard to trust people who are working at home. And those leaders typically will make sure that everybody comes on a call every morning, every evening, always has the cameras on. And if somebody doesn't have a camera on, then there is always a suspicion about that person as to why the camera is not on, because the assumption is that, that person might really not be doing the work. But what we began to understand over a period of time, that depending upon, especially in places like Mumbai, right, you live in small families, small houses, sometimes you could hear other people talking on the phone, and that, because obviously two people might be working from home. And sometimes you started to, a child would saunter in. And one thing I realized as a leader is that the onus is on you to make that person comfortable with their families for work. That's a part of your leadership job. And I was doing daily calls at that time, and I was making sure that the leaders understood that very, very well, that it was not the responsibility of the employee to make sure that they were working from a perfect workplace and keeping their productivity at the same level, but it was your responsibility as a leader to make that person understand and be grateful to that person for giving the space in their home for you to be productive. So I think that message was a very important one at that point of time. And I remember I used to always start all my calls by saying, I want to say thank you to you because you're taking space and time from your child and your family and giving it to us. And that really was the truth, because everybody's homes were a war zone. My house was a war zone. I had no help. My girl had gone home and got stuck there. It was a war zone. You had, you had dishes to do. You had, and my mother was diagnosed with cancer right after COVID.
Mhm.
So we had hospital trips to make. We had all the various things, and the only reason I could do it is because I had supportive bosses who understood that I was doing all of these five things and trusted me to be doing what I was doing, and that trust needs to pass on. But
Mhm.
it's just very hard sometimes for people to do that, and that's why I think these are very, so sometimes people say that everything is a social problem or a problem that is outside of me as a workplace leader to solve, and therefore if you have mother-in-law issues and women have more mother-in-law issues, then what can I do? Women do have a problem, they need to solve for it.
Okay.
Guys
So,
don't have those problems. But I always feel like as a manager or as a leader, it is partly your problem, and you need to understand how will you find a way out.
so 2 points. And on a lighter note, let me say that one thing you talked about the mother-in-law factor. So somebody suggested that let mothers-in-law come to the offices and see how work happens and how women participate, in offices, and maybe that will broaden their whole, horizon of understanding their own daughters-in-law. The second part that you mentioned, Shinjini, and you all laughed actually, is the how men and women are viewed differently as far as their personal situations are concerned. I think I was talking to someone about, a male and a female applying for the same job, and someone said, "Let the male get it because he has to look after a family." So the woman getting the job, what does it mean? She also has so much to cater to. So this is the problem of the horizon of mindset, and both of you would agree with that. Coming down to the another point, which is again very you would say stereotypically addressed, but something which is very important. The situations, the competition is very much there when you work as women. What about glass ceiling? What happens that you are equally competent, you are proving yourself all the time, you're good at your work, you're skilled, but how much of space do you get? Dr. Rajesh, would you like to talk about it?
The glass ceiling is a phenomenon that, all of us, especially those of us working in this space, observing women's careers and trying to see what we can do to create more inclusive workplaces. I think the glass ceiling is a construct that has been put together largely because we are unable to explain why there is a leaky pipeline. We are unable to explain why there is just 2% of women in the boards of India, despite actually the fact that there was a legislation passed to this effect. And also, if you look at any organization, there is this pyramidal shape that women's workforce participation takes, and it starts tapering so badly towards mid to senior management, and then finally it just doesn't exist at all. Now, what has really led to this construct? I think it's a couple of aspects. One is, there is still a very large industrial era hangover that I would say, which is there in the minds of a lot of, leaders, where they believe that the person at the top has to be a man. And, there is something about leadership, which is very masculine, and that entire definition of what needs to be done and the way it has to be done actually resembles a man doing it rather than a very different way of understanding or of speaking about leadership, which would be the woman's way. So I think that's one big core. And the second point, of course, is the huge amount of unconscious bias that you find in the workplace. And I mean, we at Avatar, my organization, we actually connect with corporates. We work with about 300 plus organizations and actually helping them not only create diverse workplaces but put in place equitable policies and also create inclusive culture there. Now, that inclusive culture, the first thing there is that people become self aware that they bring biases to the workplace. And this is not just the men. It's the men and the women. It's just basically everyone, because all of us, carry these huge bags of biases in our mind, which have been very helpfully kind of, lent to us by people who really care about us, and they plant it deep and nice in our minds, saying that, I made this mistake, you don't make it, beware of these type of people, don't engage these types of people. And then they have all these labels which they, kind of give to different categories, which, especially during growing up years, everyone imbibes this, and then it's extremely difficult to kind of get rid of it. So, which means the self awareness that is required by both men and women, for men to actually say that times have changed, and this is a not just an industrial era, not just an automation era, it's the artificial intelligence era. And here, if we don't have sufficient number of women, representative of everything, then we are losing out on marketplace benefits. So it's really the smart thing to have more women there, and that's what we would expect of the men. But from the women's perspective, I mean, if a glass ceiling exists, I mean, Shinjini here is a classic example of a woman who has really broken through that, and she's gone right to the top. Now, why is it that there are so few Shinjinis out there? Why is it that that's happening? And I think that has a lot to do with the fact that women do have a certain amount of aspirational deficit. I mean, I was just talking about this to another colleague a couple of days back, an organization that's struggling to find why women are so comfortable in that middle management and are refusing to actually do anything to kind of break and go up. And it has a multitude of reasons going that. So if we are to kind of divert women's aspirations, women's passions towards career achievement, leading intentional career paths, I think, the glass ceiling will become a thing of of history, hopefully.
So, Shinjini, yes, very well explained. And I think I really take your word inclusive culture very well. And I think I wish, this is my wish list, maybe, and many of us, that this should really be applied in many organizations. That's how it will work. It will encourage more women. And as you rightly said, more women should aspire also to go to the top, but not really feel a little uncomfortable. Shinjini, what would you say? What are your experiences actually? Do we have Shinjini?
Oh, sorry, I was talking on mute. Sorry.
Yeah.
So everything that Dr. Rajesh said, the aspiration deficit, as well as the fact that it isn't easy. But I just want to add one thing. It's a little bit like, why do so many Indian households buy gold, when buying gold in the damages your macroeconomy, because every household looks after its own interest. It doesn't really care for the national interest, right? It's a little bit of the same story when it comes to the women in workplace, right? It's a good thing to think about inclusive workplaces and diversity cultures. Diverse organizations are expected to yield better results and benefits. All of that is a known fact. But at my micro universe, I only live once. Like, I'm talking about any human being or a family taking a decision. And so when they are taking a decision, they aren't going to take a decision to change the world. They are going to take a decision for what works for them. And what works for them is a combination of influences that are personal, social, familial, romantic, all kinds of notions that people have. One of the notions that I find particularly damaging is the notion that that the man is the primary breadwinner of the family, and that the man has to run the house. I personally, in my house, I'm the primary, how should I put it, breadwinner. I earn a lot more money than my husband. It doesn't make my husband any less of a person. He is a hugely gifted person. He chooses to do work which is of meaning to him. It doesn't really matter how much it pays him. I happen to be working in spaces where money is important. But the number, and I know other couples like that. So it's not that it's such a rare phenomenon that you will not find couples like that. But it is still something which is not a very aspirational state for women or men when they start out. So what I'm trying to say is that maybe we should have a lot more role model couples out there rather than just women out there, Because I think it is very important for women to, and people keep talking about supportive spouses and supportive spouses, but supportive spouses doesn't mean that every morning you get up and you say, hey, you look good and you are so intelligent and I'm behind you. That's not a supportive spouse. A supportive spouse is actually somebody who can live with these kind of things. I remember that we once did this in PwC. We actually we invited three couples where the man and the woman were both working, and I was one of them. And after that talk, one young man who used to work in my team, I am graduate, he walked up to me and he said, I'm so happy that you and your husband did this together, because I've always, my wife is pregnant and we are expecting a child. We are both IIM batchmates. I believe that she is smarter than me. I believe that she could have better prospects than me. And I want to take paternity leave when we have the child to be with the child. But I don't have the courage to do it. I don't have the courage to, neither of us have the courage to actually go ahead and implement it, even though we both know and believe that this is the right thing to do, because it's so something that we've never seen happen. So by seeing you, we think that we can do it. And I think that even when you are starting out, even when you are thinking of a choice of a life partner, why is it so important for girls to think of their life partner as somebody who is necessarily, earning more money in a stable job? In fact, at Salt, we are doing this series of stories called Salt Stories. And the Salt story that is going live today is the story of one of those girls who told us exactly this. And in fact, she's a journalist. And she said that I am able to be a journalist because my family, even though they treated me the same as my brother, they put a very different expectation on my brother, that he had to have a stable job. So he had to be a doctor because he had to take care of his wife and family. I was free to choose the career I wanted to choose, because eventually what? I'll marry a guy who will have that stable career so I can afford to be a journalist and do this. Why can't it be the reverse? The good thing that I'm seeing is that the younger generation, the Gen Zs and the younger millennials, are not thinking like this. They are very, very smart in and pursuing what are their aspirations and their goals. And I don't think they necessarily have these permutations and combinations so settled in their head that this one must earn more money or that one
Okay.
must go on this. So
So
I
this
hope
is
it will change.
okay, very well said. And I think another note that we take home today is about looking at the partners, looking at the couple. Basically also looking at men who sometimes in our excitement we exclude and not think about them as to how they become our supporters and partners in the progressive program that we have for us. I think that's another element that we at Her World India are also talking about. We're saying we are talking about gender issues, we're talking about women empowerment, but we are not leaving men behind. We very much want them to be part of our dialogue. And we've had some very esteemed speakers here as well who talked about how they are contributing actually to creating this whole balanced kind of societal setup in which they are also very much a part of. So, Dr. Rajesh, today we have less time. I have another session. So I would like to now ask you 2-3 things as roadmap. I mean, what would you suggest that women must do, should do, organizations should practice, which leads to finding more rightful spaces for women as far as their employment is concerned?
I'm just going to borrow 1 minute from you, Raki, to respond to something that Shinjini said, and I think it really, it bears a reflection. See, this whole thing of the male stereotype of the male, who's the breadwinner, earner, who brings in more money, who is at a higher level position. All of that is a largely an urban construct.
Yeah,
If you
that's
go
also
to
true.
rural India, you will
Very true.
find the women, proudly being the landowners. Many of them are the ones that actually hold the money. The men just go out there and they work, and the women are absolutely not, bother about it at all. They're very chill with that thing, and it just is, it's accepted. But somewhere, and I loved how Shinjini talked about the romanticization, of this whole thing of the male being this hero who swoops in and who gets everything done, is successful and all that. That kind of has got fixated somewhere. But one thing that I'm observing today is there is a lot of discussion among young metro couples. they're no longer, just agreeing to these set stereotypes. They are having these talks. And in fact, one of the things that we did at Avatar a couple of years ago during one of our conferences was we actually spoke about what are the challenges of a double career marriage, where both people work, where both spouses work, and what do those type of lives actually have to say. Coming back to your point, Raki, where you said, what should we do, in order to claim our spaces? I'm going to restrict myself to what the woman can do, because I think there are a lot of templates for what organizations can do. I just mentioned about diversity, equity, and inclusion, which are the three aspects of how organizations can create welcoming workplaces. But I want to focus on the women. About 7 years ago, we conducted a very path-breaking study where we assessed about 2,500 people, men and women, who were successful in the, quote unquote, in the very archetypal way, as we celebrate it in the workplace, which is people who have held on to their jobs, who have grown within a company, who have reached leadership. And we kind of, talked to them and we tried to assess them, saying what was that mix of factors which led them to where they were. And the most interesting thing that we discovered was that the factors which led to a man to be successful and the factors which contributed to the woman being successful were actually the same. They were not different at all. There was really no gender skew to this. We just found that the women used those same factors to a much lesser degree than the men. So if, for instance, the men began networking, really in the right sense of the word, going outside the home, talking to people, building those communities, having a friend circle, having a support circle, they began doing that at the tender age of 15. Boys began doing that. Women started networking, at an average age of 40. Can you see the difference? So in the same way, women, are most often socialized with the entire caregiving aspect, and they are celebrated for being good caregivers. They're not celebrated for making more money. They're not celebrated for being ambitious. So we found that a lot of women who had been socialized that way and who knew that they had skills which were marketable, they were again doing well. So we kind of put these factors together and we realized that this was what was career intentionality, which is, having that focus. And I prefer to call it a vector principle, not a scalar principle, which means it has both direction and speed. It's not just about, going in one direction and, just slowly kind of progressing. No. And it's not about, just beating about the bush in the same place, but having a sense of as if you're doing a lot and being very stressed about it. No, it is strategic career planning, where you look at your career and then you develop skills congruent to the stages of career that you're in. So at the early career stage, you build certain skills. At mid career stage, you build certain other skills. As you reach matured career stage as a woman, you have certain other skills which you need to build and exhibit at that point of time. So when you start looking at your career strategically like a game of chess and not like a game of snakes and ladders, then I'm able to see that women, they flourish and they do so extremely well. And it's a pleasure to see them rise to the fullest of their potential.
Thank you so much for sharing all these inputs. And I think they're very vital and I think should really go a long way. I mean, all those participants who are listening right now, watching us, I think should really take a lot of heart in taking these very positive notes back home. Shinjini, your final words. Why salt? What do you think should be done? What is it that will really work for women?
Sure. So, Dr. Rajesh, I think I should catch up with you separately to dig into something because it's really gold. Yeah. No. So we decided to do salt because we figured that the nature of workplace is set to change forever and dramatically in favor of women. So that's my outlook for future. I strongly believe that this dropping of women from workforce was also a strong function of the fact of the artificial separation between home and work. So essentially the work that you do at home is not considered work. All the caregiving and the cooking that you do at home is not work. but then somebody goes and does it in a restaurant or in a hospital and gets paid for it, then it becomes work. But it's not work when you're doing it for free. So when somebody has a surrogate child, that having that child is paid work, but if you have a child, it's free work. So that whole definition of home being associated with free work and the external workplace being associated with paid work, I think that is set up for a big challenge at this point of time. And if we continue like this for some more time, women will figure out ways to monetize skills that they already have. So forget about acquiring skills, because that also has become a lot easier, all because of the access to technology, etc. But even the core skills and attitudes that they have, simple things like being gregarious, like having groups, like being able to influence, those are very simple things that you already have. And they are monetizing that, and they're monetizing that real fast. And the reason we decided to do SALT as a digital platform for women to understand the money and to make investment, to buy insurance, to do things about their money, is essentially because we believe that women will need to take charge of their finances if they want that process of being able to monetize their skills to be successful. Because one thing remains, the world will change, the nature of workplace will change, your aspirations will change. Everybody may become a hippie and want to do good for the world rather than do capitalist jobs. But one thing will remain, that to buy that house you will need money, to buy that car you will need money, to go from one place to another you'll need money. So you need to develop a very good understanding of money, whoever you are, and especially women, because they keep delegating it to dads, to husbands, to boyfriends, to everybody. I think it's most important that they need to take charge. So we figured that if we could build an app that was designed for women first. So SALT is not an exclusive to women app, but it is women first app. So it is designed for women, because we were trying to crack the design issue. So you can then come and be a part of a community. So we are a little bit away from the launch, but we are definitely doing things already on our social media.
So that's a very exciting concept, Shinjini, and I wish you all the best. And I think we are looking at all these. I think collaboration is the key word also, that we have to join hands. We have to also believe in solidarity. And that's where also the collective voice will make it more workable to find out, what is really there in store for us. And I'm glad, and I really...
Raki, I just want to say one thing which I always say since you asked me to conclude, I always tell women who are struggling and who say, how do I stay on in my job? And there is only one word answer to it: just do it. Think too much, you'll not do it.
We are all going to do it. I'm really tempted to say here that we'll very soon maybe have another edition, because your insights are really, really, truly, very positive, and something that we can really take a lot of understanding from. Today, of course, we'll have to end it all here. I really thank you. Please be in touch with us. Our social media handles, as you know, we are on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and LinkedIn. And also, of course, we have a website where you can always write in also whatever you think about or strongly about. On this Saturday Her World India Talk Show, I really thank you once again, both you ladies. And we want to take it all together to make a society which is more progressive. And we'll look at areas of concern and challenges as well in future, and we'll take advice from you. But thank you so much. Inakshi, would you like to say something? Because Inakshi is the one, if you're present, just a short sentence. Dr. Rajesh?
Yes, surely. So, it's a pleasure listening to women who have been such pioneers, because for younger women like us, there are times when, although we are aware of our rights, we don't know how to take it on, if I can say, in the man's world. So definitely this session has been very, very inspiring for us. Thank you.
Okay. So thank you so much once again, and we'll very soon be in touch with you, and keep watching us, keep supporting us. We all need to do it to each other. And thank you once again. I thank you, Gender Lab, Miranda House, once again, all the viewers and participants who have been with us all these days. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Raki. And Shinjini, yes, let's connect.
Yeah, wonderful. Thank you.
Best wishes, women watching this. Rise to the fullest of your potential.
Yes.
Okay, thank you so much. Yes. Thank you.